Hello friends, in this video we will try to see an overview and outline of modern Indian history. What we have decided to do is that we have decided to split the modern Indian history into 3 classes and we have decided to upload them based on that. The modern Indian history which I will be covering in part 1 is from 1707 to 1857. In part 2 I will be covering from 1857 to 1927, and in the part 3 I will be covering from 1927 to 1947. So this class is the part 1 modern Indian history. This is an outline of modern Indian history. I will not be doing all the aspects of the modern Indian history in detail. It is just a bird's eye view of modern Indian history. So where we have to start this modern Indian history, as I have said, from 1707 to 1857, this 150 years what happened in the British rule or what happens in India, that we will try to see in a sequentiation. We all know the first important aspect which happened in 1707 happens to be death of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb happens to be the great Mughal emperor. He died in the year 1707, and after the death of Aurangzeb, what happens in India happens to be the decline and disintegration of the Mughals. Decline and disintegration of the Mughals happened after the death of Aurangzeb, because Aurangzeb was one of the last great rulers of Mughal Empire, and after his death, those rulers who came after him, they were called as late Mughals or later Mughals, starting from Bahadur Shah, Jahandar Shah, Farrukh Shiar, Rangila, and he is called Muhammad Shah Rangila. Then we have Shah Alam II, then followed by Akbar II, then we have Bahadur Shah Jafar, happens to be the last Mughal emperor in the chain, and up to 1857. He was the Mughal emperor in 1857, and after the revolt of 1857, Bahadur Shah Jafar had been deported and imprisoned to Myanmar. So this is a small outline of the later Mughal emperors who had ruled. In 1707, one thing we have to understand is the later Mughals who ruled, there were a lot of reasons in the later Mughals which were existing, which were responsible for the decline of the Mughal empire. The reasons were many. Just to outline a few reasons. One, nobility. The nobility which existed during the later Mughals were a weak nobility. They were not as competent, they were not as strong as they existed during the time of great Mughals like Akbar. So the nobility, they tried to create party factions, they tried to fight amongst each other over a period of time. This led to the weakening of the fabric, this led to the weakening of the empire which had been created by rulers like Akbar. Then we have something which is called War of Succession. The War of Succession had been a constant factor which existed after the death of every Mughal emperor. The children or the descendants of the Mughal emperor, they used to fight amongst themselves. The sons of the Mughal emperors, they used to fight amongst themselves in order to choose who should become a successor or who should sit in the throne. Though the War of Succession over a period of time was very important, War of Succession was very important because it decided the strongest would sit in the throne. But over a period of time, the War of Succession was creating lot of problem, and that also was responsible for the decline of the Mughal emperor. Then we have the problems associated with the Rajputs. The Rajputs had been made as an integral part of the Mughal empire by Akbar. Over a period of time, during the time of Aurangzeb, Rajputs and Aurangzeb did not have good terms, and as a whole Rajputs they began to oppose the policies of Aurangzeb. Then we have the problems associated with the Marathas, and the Marathas and the Aurangzeb, their affair, it is a great topic, it is a big class that we will do later on the Marathas. Then we have something who is called Sikhs. The issue between the Mughals and the Sikhs, that also was responsible for the decline. I am not going to speak about the causes, I am not going to explain the aspects which are existing. This class is intended to give just an outline of the sequentiation of the developments which happened. I am not going to explain in this class the causes and the reasons why an event had happened. That we will do separate classes to explain that. So these all were responsible for the weakening of the Mughal Empire. And the weakening of the Mughal Empire was further aided by the emergence of Marathas. Marathas emerged in the political arena starting from 1714 and up to 1761. The Marathas, they emerged as empire builders. The Marathas was supposed to fill the vacuum created by the decline of the Mughal Empire, and they were supposed to become the all Indian rulers. But the ambition of the Marathas had been put to end in the year 1761 after the third battle of Panipat. I have done a separate class video and I have uploaded this video, which is the third battle of Panipat and the reasons or the causes for the defeat of the Marathas, consequence of the defeat of the Marathas. We have already uploaded the video. Please watch that video also to understand this. So the Marathas 1714 to 1761, they could not fill the vacuum or void which was created. Added to this is during this time foreigners who visited India as invaders. Foreigners visited India, namely one foreigner in the year 1739, his name happens to be Nadir Shah. Nadir Shah visited India in the year 1739. He invaded India in the year 1739 and he looted the whole of Delhi and he returned. And similarly in the year 1761, we have a person who is called Ahmad Shah, whom I have mentioned in the third battle of Panipat. Ahmad Shah also visited India and he defeated the existing dynasties there, and all these foreign invasions also over a period of time gradually declined, gradually weakened the Mughal Empire. So when this Mughal Empire was in the state of weakening, and it is during this time that the foreign companies, the foreign trading companies which were existing in India, they began to penetrate and percolate in a longer duration. They began to penetrate, they began to percolate the foreign rulers and the foreign companies. Which are the foreign companies which were present in India by this time? Foreign trading companies. Which are the foreign trading companies which were existing? For example, the first foreign company, the first country to trade with India in the medieval time happens to be Portuguese, and a Portuguese traveler, his name happens to be Vasco da Gama. Vasco da Gama, he came to India in the year 1498. Following this, one by one, all the foreigners and all the foreign companies, they try to enter into India. First to come happens to be the Portuguese, and for information, the last company to quit India, to vacate India happens to be the Portuguese. So the Portuguese were the first to come and the last to vacate India. Next, followed by the Portuguese happens to be the English Trading Company. Over a period of time, we call them into East Indian Trading Company. We will discuss about that later. Over a period of time, we have something which is called Danish Company. We have something which is called Dutch. Then we have something which is called French. So all these trading companies, they were existing from 1500s in India, and by this time which I am speaking, which is 1750s, these trading companies, having found a vacuum which was existing in the northern part of India, they tried to fill the vacuum created by the decline of the Mughal Empire. So the Mughal Empire was declining in one place, and the foreign companies, they wanted to fill the vacuum. Next, amongst the foreign companies which were existing, we have Britain, we have France, and all other companies. And you should know, by 1750s, there was a conflict which emerged between British East Indian Trading Company and the French company as to who should become the leader in India. Which company should become the leader in India? That competition emerged, and because of the competition, what emerged happens to be a war between them. In this war is called Carnatic War. Carnatic Wars in history. The Carnatic Wars were fought in the Carnatic region, and normally the war is fought between Britain and France. And in this Carnatic War, one thing was very clearly established, is that the Britain defeated French company, and over a period of time, Britain became the monopoly company in India. And this also happens in the year 1750s. Then after this, the British company, over a period of time, having established their monopoly, wanted to establish a political control over the provinces in India. The first experiment of this political control of this British company or the East Indian Company were tried in Bengal. And the result, what happened, happens to be in 1757, a battle emerged which is called Battle of Plassey. And the Battle of Plassey was fought between the Bengal ruler, who is called Siraj-ud-Dowlah, and the British. And in this battle, Siraj-ud-Dowlah was defeated, and the British, over a period of time, began to establish a foothold in Bengal. So this is the beginning of the political ambition of the British. After this, means Battle of Plassey in the year 1757, then they had another battle which is called Battle of Buxar. This battle was also fought in Bengal. The Battle of Buxar was also fought in Bengal. So this Buxar battle clearly established the monopoly, clearly established the dominance of the British in India. So these are the very important milestones in the East Indian Company. Having established their political control, the British East Indian Company, over a period of time after entering into India, they have begun to entrench into India. Entrench. They have entered into India. Now, an entrenchment process happens for the East Indian Company starting from 1770s to 1850s. Entrenchment process. What is the meaning of entrenchment process? Entrenchment means they began to take roots. Entrench means they began to establish their administrative systems, they began to establish their systems so as to continue their domination in India, so as to dominate India and to rule India. This process of entrenchment had happened in India by Regulating Act, which was passed. Regulating Act was passed in the year 1773. Over a period of time, every 20 years we have an act. These acts were called as Charter Acts. We will do a separate class for the Regulating Acts, Charter Acts. What are the provisions? What is the difference between different Regulating Acts? We will try to do. So the Regulating Acts over a period of time created a system in India wherein which the British would systematically rule India. By this Regulating Act, what became a normal process happens to be the appointment of Governor Generals in India. The first Governor General to be appointed by the Regulating Act happens to be Warren Hastings. Warren Hastings. So Warren Hastings was the first Governor General, and over a period of time Warren Hastings, Cornwallis, Wellesley, sequentiation wise, one by one all the Governor Generals we are going to see in some other class. What are the achievements of the Governor Generals, what did they do, why did they do, all we will see. And just sufficient to know that in the process of entrenchment, the British had begun to establish some system. For example, in order to collect the land revenue system, they established a permanent land revenue settlement. The permanent land revenue settlement was introduced in the year 1793 in Bengal during the time of Cornwallis. Similarly, other land revenue settlements were introduced in India. For example, Rayatwari settlement, Mahalwari settlement, etc. This Rayatwari settlement was introduced in Madras provinces, permanent land revenue settlement was introduced in Bengal, Rayatwari settlement in Madras, Mahalwari settlement in Central province and Bombay. In all these places, these land revenue settlements were established. These land revenue settlements gave a sense of entrenchment to the British. Added to this, the British tried to establish their entrenchment in some other manner. That some other manner happens to be forming an alliances with the native states in India, and that system is called subsidiary alliances. The subsidiary alliances were introduced in the year 1798 during the time of Wellesley as a Governor General. When Wellesley was present, and in the year 1798 a subsidiary alliances treaty were introduced. What is this subsidiary alliances treaty and why the subsidiary alliances treaty were introduced, what are its provisions, etc. we will see later, but sufficient to note that the subsidiary alliances treaty were making the Indian states subordinate to the wishes of the East Indian Company. And after the subsidiary alliances treaty had been established, gradually one after the another governors come. Simultaneously during this time, one after another Indian states had been annexed by the East Indian Company. The East Indian Company or the British, they fought continuous wars in India. For example, starting from Carnatic Wars, and they had defeated French and established as the monopoly. Then they fought wars with Mysore, and this Mysore is called Anglo-Mysore War, and Mysore had been annexed after this war. They established a war which is called Anglo-Burmese War. In the Anglo-Burmese War, Burma had been annexed, you must know, and Anglo-Sikh War. So Punjab had been annexed. Then they fought Anglo-Afghan War, and Afghan had been defeated and brought under their influence, but the influence of Afghanistan had remained short-lived, so Anglo-Afghan War also happened. Added to this is Anglo-Maratha War. Maratha province all had been annexed. So step by step what we are seeing, starting from the year 1760s to 1850s, step by step all these states which are existing in India, one after another, they had been defeated and annexed with the East Indian Company or annexed with the British. So we are seeing that in a process of let us say 100 years, all the Indian states initially had been weakened by the Subsidies Alliances Treaty, and after they have been weakened by the Subsidies Alliances Treaty, they had been totally annexed by the British. Not only they have politically annexed, systematically also land revenue system and all other systems were responsible for entrenchment of the British in India. So all this happened, and the climax of the entrenchment happened during the time of Dalhousie. Dalhousie came to India in the year 1848 and he ruled from 1848 to 1856. Dalhousie. And during the time of Dalhousie, he was one important Governor General who came to India, and whatever existing provinces, whatever existing small states which had not been annexed were annexed using certain mechanisms, like for example doctrine of lapses. He used a principle of what is called as doctrine of lapses, and you must know I have done a separate video for the revolt of 1857, part 1 revolt of 1857. If you see the video part 1 1857 revolt, in this revolt I would have spoken about doctrine of lapses, how this was implemented, what is the meaning of doctrine of lapses, etc. So Dalhousie using doctrine of lapses, doctrine of misgovernance, doctrine of outright annexations. Over a period of time, Dalhousie annexed whatever part which was left by the British. So that also became very important. So the policies of Dalhousie over a period of time created a friction amongst the Indians, and Dalhousie not only annexed the political, over a period of time he interfered into the affairs of the religion, and all this culminated in a process which happened in the year 1857. 1857 is a very important year in history. 1857 is a very important year in history, and in the next class I am going to speak from 1857 revolt and to 1927. This sequentiation I am going to speak in the next class. Thanks for watching the video. Please watch all my other classes in history which I have done, so that in the future classes it becomes easy for you to understand the classes which I am making. Please share this video also. Thank you.